This is the Open Global Mind weekly call for Thursday, April 17th, 2025. I'm actually in an Airbnb in Dublin. So, yeah, so it's 4 p.m. here. And I've just come, you who are on time for the meeting will learn this. It's to be kept secret afterward. Just come from the Guinness tour, the Guinness brewery tour,
Mm.
which is a seven-story building shaped like a big glass of Guinness. And they give you history, they give you, how it's brewed, et cetera, et cetera. And at the very top, you get when you buy your ticket for the self-guided tour, you get a ticket for a pour of a Guinness on their penthouse, which is all glass all the way around. It's the best view of Dublin. So that was an hour ago.
How many Guinnesses did you drink?
Just the one plus a little taster earlier when they sort of give you a little sample on the way through. Not that buzzed. It's not that high ABV, so doing okay.
Well, also Guinness is food, man.
Guinness is like eating pumpernickel bread.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much. Very much. And then earlier today, to compensate for the Guinness, we did the
Oh,
Are we all, can you hear me?
I hear you, but not Jerry.
Can hear
Oh,
you.
Jerry, yeah, okay.
It's just Jerry.
weather was miserable, kind of drippy. And today the weather was beautiful, so the cliff walk was great. We have today a lovely subject, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. And we have a volunteer in Shimon who said, I'm working on kind of a crazy project, and I could really use the OGM group's feedback on it. And the project is completely apropos to what we're up to. And if anyone else has some thoughts or projects, I'd love to go to them as well. But anybody have sort of, and the general theme is what things should we be doing now? What works? Given that there are a variety of meta, poly, and super uber crises going on, one of which is a self-inflicted wound by our own government. What are the right things to do? What are good things and productive things to do in society? So I'm gonna try to corral our conversation so we go there rather than other topics. Any questions or perspectives on this before I invite Shimon to jump in? We're good. Shimon, it appears you have the floor.
Okay, well, it's nice to be here again. I see actually, besides Stacy and Klaus, everybody and Jerry, I mean, everyone is, to me, new. So I guess during the presentation, I will also introduce myself, which is part of this presentation. So as Jerry was saying, I've been engaged in this process or project probably for the last 30 years, but now I'm sort of like congregated or coalesced it into something that I think for me finally makes sense to make it more public at this point in time. So actually this is one of the first presentations that I'm doing for the whole project, which is called Project 2026. Certainly Klaus and I have spoken about it. One aspect of it, long ago, Stacy and I spoke a little bit about some aspects of it. So I would like to just introduce and create kind of an overview of the project. It's obviously, like I said, it's like 30 years in the making, so there's a lot more to it. I'm just going to do like an overview, and the goal for me is to get as much feedback about like just in general, does it hang together? Not necessarily what directions to take it, because I certainly have a lot of thoughts about it, but certainly it's been a group that's very reflective, and I would really greatly benefit from any input. So let me share my slide presentation, and I kind of am hoping to develop this into more of a YouTube video as I am trying to make this whole project, more public. So let me.
There we go.
Okay, so this is actually called Project 2026. And if it sort of like suggests some kind of response to Project 2025, it certainly is. So essentially, this project is comprised of an effort to revive the American promise, one citizen at a time. And the idea being we're sort of confronted with a lot of very challenging times politically, socially, economically. Many people are focusing on resistance. My thinking is that we need to think about positive ways to move forward. So, what I'd like to do now is just introduce you to the project. Some reason.
You're not in slideshow mode yet? You're not presenting,
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do is,
think? Or are you? Because it hasn't taken over your whole screen, although we are seeing a slide at a time.
yeah, I
There
am
we go.
trying. Okay, here we go.
Okay, slideshow. There we go. Much better. Thanks.
Yeah, that's what I was hesitant about. All right.
Good. Cool.
Okay. So essentially, and by the way, I am working a lot with the various LLMs, mostly ChatGPT, but I'm also working with Gemini and Claude. And some of what you see here is my effort to, get some thoughts uh, about certain aspects for the program. So one of them is just the taglines. So this is generated obviously by ChatGPT, and the taglines for this project 2026 you'll see coming up as well. So what is Project 2026? This is another tagline, Moonshot for America's Third Century. And essentially, it's a kind of visionary, what I call visionary initiative that seeks to harness the ideals of the US Declaration of Independence, particularly focusing on aspects of democracy, opportunity, and citizenship. This is particularly important as we're approaching the 250th anniversary of the Declaration, which in my mind and the mind of many other people is one of the most incredible documents ever written, and has really unfolded and provided us an opportunity to really flourish in many ways. So as we are at this current moment, the project seeks to enhance our democratic engagement, increase opportunity, and strengthen civic participation across communities. Again, this is another tagline. Hopefully, if people have strong feelings about any of them, let me know. I'm still looking for a good tagline. The goal for this project is to facilitate citizen flourishing across their lives, which I think is a fundamental purpose for government. It certainly was articulated by some of the founding fathers and defined what brought essentially some of the ideas of the Declaration of Independence into being. And I have kind of created, and this came about after kind of everyone was up in arms, not everyone, but a lot of people about DEI. I came up with democracy, opportunity, and citizenship, and I call it a moonshot. And also the other ideal that this project promotes is popular sovereignty. And again, we're trying to address the challenges we're having right now in our nation and the urgent need to revitalize and protect, opportunity and protect our, democracy. And this is another tagline, which is something that's driving this process is really recognizing first principles of our democracy and how to turn them at this point in time moving forward into flourishing futures. So I'm actually, Jerry, how much time do you think I have for the presentation? Because I can do it rather quickly and then open for discussion, or we can do it in a way that people can interrupt at any time, whichever works.
Yeah, you said you'd be brief, and I said brief sounds great. To me, brief is like under 10 minutes.
Okay,
But it looks like you have a longer outline than that. And I'll just note that your last 3 slides have been a little bit duplicative. If I were prompting ChatGPT or you, I would say boil the last 3 slides down into something simpler. I
yeah,
love where you're aiming, but you've said it 3 times now.
okay. Uh,
Um, so go so go ahead and try to get through it quickly, and then let's use the chat for a while for feedback, and then at some point we'll sort of either interrupt or you'll be done, and we'll go into the conversation.
Okay, good. So essentially in the presentation, I mean, I went a little bit over what it is, and then the various components are, one is called Moonshot Press, which is essentially a publication that's part of Project 2026. And that includes, and I'll sort of touch on it in a minute, quite a lot of what I call citizen toolbox and different deliberative processes. There's a number of initiatives that I'm undertaking with Project 2026. One is called the Life Trajectory, which again looks at how do we, at different stages of life, maximize people's ability to reach and become thriving and flourishing. The other one is the Ninth Amendment, which I think is very important as a concept for engaging citizens. And the last initiative that I'm going to talk about is just the 2026 election, looking at 5 critical issues. These are areas that are also part of it because the idea is to develop all these initiative and ideas and then try them out in a local setting. The local setting is the county that I live in, and I'm rolling that out in the next month or so. Now, just about myself, just as a background, I'm a retired psychiatrist, so a lot of what I bring to this effort comes from like a medical model, psychological model, certainly social model, somewhat of trying to understand psychology of individuals, but also apply it to kind of a more broad collective, including the nation. And the framing for this is the 250th anniversary. I build on the US Constitution and Declaration, which essentially oftentimes we tend to not really pay that much attention to. But I think, again, like I said before, it's very, very central to what we're doing. A key component and kind of a driving force is the recognition that every child deserves to thrive. There's going to be about 3,613 children born in the next year. How do we assure that they achieve that potential for thriving? And a way to kind of operationalize it is to look at general trajectory patterns. This is well-established research that shows that people from early infancy are going to go through various trajectories that lead them to healthy life, at risk, and poor health and trajectories. David Brooks called it university, military, and the prison system. So what I'm trying to suggest and look at is what can we do to kind of focus to make sure that as many people as possible through what we do, through policy, through various other, actions, achieve more of a flat, flourishing trajectory. The moonshot is built on three pillars: democracy, opportunity, and citizenship. I mean, I expand on that. I'm going to go through it very quickly. But again, the questions is how do we kind of, throughout democracy, how do we establish that people, when they reach the age of becoming formal citizens, have the capability to engage? And that involves the biological, social, and certainly the cultural opportunity to engage. In terms of opportunity, same thing. How do we kind of think about what it is that people need to achieve the ability to function? The questions that we ask here is what are the core capabilities that people have? Citizenship, one of the things that I like to kind of suggest is that we have a great constitution, but it didn't come with a user's manual. And there's a lot of friction in the system. So what is the toolbox? What are the deliberative structures that we need to put in place so people can engage as citizens, including the educational system? Why now? I mentioned Project 2025. We're certainly, right? We certainly are challenged by who is leaders now, the Doge, and Doge actually has been very interesting to me because one of the declarations that they had was that they're using the Supreme Court decision of, Chevron deference as a reason for establishing that, like Doge. And I essentially leveraged that to show that there's a different way. I'm also very influenced by advances of digital technology, which allows us to do a lot more than was possible before. I'm not going to get into like the theory of change, but essentially the question is, how do we change the paradigms? And the paradigm here is that, as I said before, there's at least 3.6 million people or babies born. How do we establish this trajectory? What I do as part of this effort is look at three specific, newborns that are going to be going through different trajectories, and then think about what is it that we can do. And Project 2026 is dedicated to really creating as much of an opportunity to go on this healthy and flourishing trajectory. Institute of Salutogenesis is not that important, but Moonshot Press, and again, I can include in the chat links so that you can actually get more hands-on encounter with Moonshot Press. It has a different form of journalism. It looks at complex issues. It looks at beginning with a vision and what is going to be needed to achieve it. And I really kind of go along with the primary purpose of journalism is to provide, I guess, citizens with the ability to interact with their government. So right now I'm focusing on three initiatives. One is the life trajectory, the Ninth Amendment, and the elections. Mentioned that before. The life trajectory, again, is what is it that's required at each stage along the life trajectory, and what is available in terms of policy, what are the challenges. Again, this looks at a lot of the different factors that are involved. And right now, when we have the capabilities of, AI, I've actually been using that with various agents to look at the different spheres, come up with a whole plan. As kind of inspired by the People's Commission that RFK is doing, I've used my agents and other people actually to establish a People's Commission to make our children's healthy, which actually really goes deep into the scientific background, the policies that exist right now, and more of a comprehensive approach that looks at what is going on where are the gaps and what can we do to move people towards flourishing. This is actually one of the GPT tools that I'm using that actually provides a tool for people to actually really translate what we're coming up with into stuff that they have at their hands so that they can maximize their opportunity to engage in a healthy life. The Ninth Amendment, again, it's a matter of how do we think about what's available, including the Administrative Procedure Act and DOGE and various other processes using AI to really engage with government in a meaningful way. If anyone's interested, I've done that with a number of like CDC guidelines and various other federal mandates and guidelines. So essentially, if people don't remember, the Ninth Amendment is about that certain rights shall not be construed to deny the rights retained by the people. And in my mind, if government's not doing what they're supposed to do, it's sort of like the right of the people to do it. It's sort of like a cute slide of Donald Trump before, let's see, and after. I build on James Madison's centrality of the people, looking at how the Constitution, the DNA sort of like turns into, the architecture of the federal government, and then trying to really understand it. This is again how the citizen fits within their ecosystem. And if people don't recognize that this is Kumu, it's a relational program. And for each one of these, there's an in-depth explanation, how to engage with these people, things of that kind. The Administrative Procedure Act, I think is very relevant, and we use that partly to challenge DOGE and other federal agency. Election 2026, essentially the question that we ask that I'm interested in, what is it that we're not talking about? There's a lot of noise and there's a reason for that, but there's certainly things that are not being talked about and need to be talked about. My plan is, or my goal of 2026, is how to create meaningful dialogue about these aspects of what really is hampering people from achieving a thriving life, including artificial intelligence. It's evolving, universal healthcare, but beyond that, economic opportunity, addiction, and public health. How do we go towards universal health care? So it's all about asking different types of questions. This is each one is explained a little bit more. And we're actually with a different team working on what should really be the outcome, the measures that we're looking at. And we are going to be rolling this out in a local setting in Montgomery County, and then hopefully scaling it up. So this is the ecosystem within Montgomery County that we're working with. And essentially, we're looking to try to get people to engage with this as much as they're willing or can make sense of that. And that's about it.
Shimon, thank you. That's a lot. And thank you for going through it quickly. I think we got a good taste for what you're talking about. If you'll keep the presentation up in case anybody wants to refer to a page. Anybody with comments? Gil has his hand up, so let's go to Gil.
Yeah, Shimon, thanks for this. I have a powerful sense of what you really care about, and the dimensions and the relationships and the depth of your thinking over these decades. But I don't know what the project is. You say you're rolling it out in Montgomery County soon. What are you rolling out? What's the it?
It is a process by which people can engage with their representatives with their political representatives, not just on the federal and state level, which I've started doing, engaging with them and understanding how they fit into this moment in time and presenting the various topics that I mentioned that I'm going to try to work with towards the upcoming election.
So if there's something unique about the process of engagement that you're talking about, I would love to have that said and sort of sketched way up early in the presentation. Um, I posted a note in the several comments about presentation in the chat, but one of them I posted was I was 5 or 6 slides in and still didn't know what this was, and now I've gone through the whole presentation with you and still didn't know what this was. So if you give me something that's a clearer, more descriptive headline early on, then I'm going to lean forward in my chair and say, okay, tell me more about that. Um, but without that, I'm sitting there thinking, what is it that I'm listening to? Why is this important? How does this affect me? What do I do with it? So I need some clues early on. And in the business context, the analogy would be the elevator pitch, you know, 10 or 15 seconds that gives somebody something they can walk away with and say to somebody else accurately along the lines of, we're going to do X for constituency Y with result Z. And that may be to an extreme of form, what you're trying to do. But if I just meet you at a cocktail party and we have a brief conversation before somebody else interrupts, how do I walk away being able to be enthusiastic about and convey to somebody else what you're talking about? Right now, I couldn't go next, to the next room and tell my wife, I just heard a presentation about X. I still don't know what X is. The the 2026 date is really important. The 250th anniversary of the Declaration, I think, is a very powerful place to hook something on. But I want to see more of the meat of what it is.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Shimon, feel free to respond or think out loud or whatever else. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and that's why I wanted to present it even at this stage. It's certainly very, very helpful. The problem that I have is and the question that I
Oh,
also
yeah,
have
Mom already gave her one.
is how to move forward with that. And I have a whole strategic plan that goes exactly into it. So, for example, the first 1,000 days of life really has this is what we're doing. We're gathering from experts what is the database for making decisions. We're engaging with the Secretary of State in the state. What are the programs that exist right now? And we're doing town hall type things to move that part of the project forward. So yeah, I think my challenge is to how to roll it out. My thinking is, and I may be totally wrong, is just as a physician, psychiatrist or dealing with a major condition, you want to have a multi-dimension or like intervention that's not one thing. And I'm kind of offering a number of interventions once I define the problem.
thanks, Shimon. On the one hand, it sounded like you were offering to rebuild a national health and mental health service for our first 1,000 days. That didn't engage for me with civic engagement. Like those two things felt like completely different themes in your presentation, and I was interested in like what you wanted to kind of do together. But as Gil said, I like feel your passion through all of it. I'm just trying to figure out how the different pieces fit together, and I think maybe we all are. Let's just see what Kevin and Klaus and Alex have to say. Go ahead, Kevin.
I would avoid everybody who wants a coherent elevator pitch at this point. That's not the time for this. But I do want to know how I find out more about Montgomery County. You figure out what it really is when you're in a place and you keep bumping into those people. Is there a website for Montgomery County?
Yeah, actually, part of this process is rethinking what journalism is.
Yeah. Is there a website for Montgomery County? That's my question. On your local project, is there a
On
place I
my
can
local,
find out about it?
yeah, there is, and that's actually part of the business idea.
Yeah, can you put a link to the Montgomery County project so that I can spend more time looking at it?
Well, why don't I just show you?
No,
Can I
please
just,
give me a link that I can look at online when you're not talking and I can go into deeper. Let me dive into Montgomery County. Please give me a way to do it.
can I just for a second, I will be happy to do it.
Okay.
Let me just share this screen so you can see can you see
Kevin,
that?
I can see that, yes.
Okay, so
Kevin, do you
this
mean the
is,
Montgomery County official website or Shimon's website for Montgomery
Shimon's
County?
website about Montgomery County, obviously.
right.
Yeah,
So the idea is that we have Moonshot Press, which is an organizing kind of press. This is after like the Free Press, Barry Weiss's. So right here you have the different aspects of it. And this is Thrive in Montgomery County. So this is the website for Montgomery County on Substack. So essentially what you will see is the first 1,000 days in Montgomery County. You will also see what is the ecosystem for the first 1,000 days in Montgomery County, what you can do, what hospitals in Montgomery County are actually doing for what they're doing in terms of maternal care. And Jerry, this is actually has nothing to do with just mental health. This is, again, the belief that in order to have democracy, you have to have citizens that are healthy. You can't have citizens that are exposed to toxins, whether they're stressed during early life or fluoride in water or various other things, because by the time they reach 18, they're never going to be healthy citizens. So it's more about democracy and defining it as a conversation amongst people who are able to engage in that conversation. So, anyways, to your point about Montgomery County, it goes healthcare in Montgomery County, places that matter. This is, again, what's happening in Montgomery County, the ecosystem, technology. So I actually have that whole, what I call the salutogenic assistant, has something to do with Montgomery County. A goal for me is to work with all the hospitals so that they can access information on benefits, information on health options and things of that kind for everybody. Again, this is getting involved. So if you want to get involved with Montgomery County, again, it gives you, like an ecosystem approach and all that. Okay.
So is the Substack the way to find out about Montgomery County, or is there more?
Well, you can go into the Montgomery County, PA, and they
No,
have a website.
no, I'm talking about your effort in Montgomery County. Is the Substack the way to find out?
That's the way it's gonna be moving forward. And that's
So,
another question that I have.
yeah, I mean, Substacks are great to read one story after another. They're not a wiki, they're not a website, they're not comprehensive or coherent across many issues. I mean, it's a very good publishing platform if that's what all you're going to do.
Yeah, I would be happy to work with anyone who is interested in exploring that. See, that's my problem again, is really thinking it through with experts. So I also have a Wix website, and it does have the Montgomery County part. The
Yeah.
problem that I have is if you thought that what I presented, and Gil rightly commented that it's too broad, when I start bringing some of these other things, people's minds get blown out. So essentially, I do have the whole thing about Montgomery County, including, the ecosystem, like what does it look like first days there. Uh, so if someone through Wiki or through some other way, what my frustration is, again, and if you kind of work with, as I'm sure all of you, like just keeping reading articles and finding the most important data points, it's not going to make any change.
Right.
That's why a big part of what I try to do is start from the position of first principles, theory of change, and needing to change paradigms. And so the idea would be once I get the Thriving Montco, which I'm hoping to launch, like soon, then anyone who's interested in any county can just duplicate it so that you have a map, and I think that that's possible, of your entire political ecosystem. And if we can coordinate, and there, God knows, there's probably about 50 organizations that I get daily emails from about how they're resisting and how they're better angels and how they're this and that. If we can coordinate and approach legislatures, Montgomery County happens to be in a place where it's kind of Republican Democrat. We can get 40 of these legislators that are kind of dependent on the Republican Party. Again, I'm not partisan here, or the Democrats, but say this is the conversation we want to have in this county and you're representing us. I think it can make a difference. I may be wrong, but that's why it's sort of like a kind of crazy vision.
Yeah, I think I would avoid the seduction of coherence right now. And you're in an appropriate state of sprawling everywhere, and don't let people put you into and I don't mean to target you, Gil, but demand for an elevator. I presented that there's this group called Intro, and I presented to somebody who'd been in a food business the multiple initiatives I'm doing, and he had one exit. He said, "That's the most confused and sprawling pitch I've ever heard." And I said, "Well, I'm successful 8 out of 9 times, and you're successful 1 time, and you can't see what I'm doing. It's at the appropriate state of incoherence right now, and you want to drive toward market rate returns." And I came up with a solution that fit him, but I won't use that intro service again, because they're just driving you toward market returns. So please avoid. I want you to continue to avoid the seduction of coherence and those who want you to make sense before you should. My good friend Matt Flannery, who built Kiva, he lost in all the venture accelerator kinds of things for like 6 times until they got approved. And he said they were all creme brulee deals. They look good on top, but they weren't really baked. And he built something that does more than 150 million a year because he didn't call it baked until it was baked. So ignore the folks who say this doesn't make sense. Just ignore them.
Well, I've been involved in a lot of initiatives, and for me, the stage of trying to get feedback to one thing really doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
So that's
well,
why
you're not doing just one thing, so yeah, that's appropriate.
Well,
in the quest for
I've presented to this group at different stages.
The boss wants us to stop talking.
What?
Gary wants us to stop talking.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I just want to, in the quest for slow coherence, I want to see what Klaus and Alex and Stacy have to say, because we could go back and forth for a long time, but let's get more points of view in here. Go ahead, Klaus, please.
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, Shimon, this is just an amazing body of work that you have put together there, and just some really wonderful thoughts. and intentions. I just think that it needs some connectivity, because what I see is you project 2026, there's sort of the umbrella, right? And then you have the kind of civic engagement, coming back to the Constitution as one body of thought and action. And then there is this first 1,000 days of life that doesn't want to come in there. There is a bridge missing to connect those two. So that's what it said. So what Gil was saying is pretty much along the same lines. It's an introduction that sets the stage for where you are going. And Project 2026 is clearly a call to action, saying, no, we're at risk of losing our Constitution here. We are really exposed to a great level of danger. So we need to go back to this Constitution and understand what is it saying about our role as citizens in this political process and engagement. So that's one part. And then the other part is, now let's face it, if we want to maintain our civilization, then our children are our future. And the way our children are currently exposed to bad influences during their formative stages, is putting us all at risk, because there are issues these forming adults carry into their future. So I think if you wrap it into this umbrella, right now there is really no logical connection between the civic component and the first 1,000 day of life part, but there is a way to connect it, and I think then it would make sense, and I would just drastically shorten it, so that bring it down to like maybe 15 slides at the most, 10-15 slides.
Thanks.
Alex.
Hi, Shimon. Like everybody else, very impressive, the stuff you've done, you've created, and you showed us. Right, I know elevator speeches are not the way of the world based on the audience. However, okay, the way I work, or the way my brain works, isn't at a high level, academic, conceptual kind of level. Okay, so I'm at a disadvantage with all this anyway. So I'll go with Gil and say, actually, I didn't quite understand what it was. And then having heard everybody, so who's your audience, or what did you want us to give you feedback? You said you wanted feedback, but feedback on what aspect of this? Complexity, helpfulness? So that would have helped me frame the whole thing. And I just wrote down whilst people were talking, I said, so I'm just throwing it out there. It's not an elevator pitch, don't call it that, right? But as a start to the presentation, you could have said, what would have worked with me is, I'm setting up an organization, I don't know what it is, using a website of resources to help us create a new way of organizing society to work together in the fields of list whatever important fields. What I need help with is for people to help us do the following. And that frames, for me personally, I don't know about the others, but for me personally, it frames what it is I'm expected to pick out of it. Because the way it came across, I didn't know until I saw the Montgomery website. I honestly did not know what it was that you were presenting and what it was that I was expected to identify with.
I appreciate that.
Does that help in any way? I don't know. I hope it's not negative. I'm sorry.
You what?
I hope it's not negative. I don't mean it as a negative thing. It's just a different way.
I'm actually looking for the negative. The positive usually doesn't help.
But all people are different.
Right.
People are very different. So you've got to find a way of anyway, that's it. Thank
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
My
Stacey,
comment's not positive or negative. It's a suggestion that I think might address some of the issues that were brought up. And I've tried this before. if you took the work that you have in Substack and fed it into Google LLM to create a podcast that people could listen to, and then you could start the conversation from there.
Very good.
Well, if you go to, I mean, I have actually a podcast that I created with Google LLM, with Knowledge LM. I mean, I have one on each one of them on, like Moonshot Press, on Project 2026. And it always tells me this is quite an interesting, complicated project. I mean, they talk to each other, but what have we here? Anyway, so yeah, but that's a great idea.
Yeah, and thank you. But what I'm suggesting is not to separate the projects. Put everything in together, let the podcasters separate it and discuss it.
Thanks.
The podcast may not be the path to the coherence, I think, because the podcast will sort of try to amusedly make a conversation out of it. But you could put the big bucket of text into one of these engines and say, hey, can you reorganize this so that it ties together more cleanly? And you might even say, give me 5 different ways to organize these thoughts. The thoughts that you find in here, give me 5 different ways of presenting these that have some coherence, and then pick your favorite from those 5 and try that out as a line through. And then that might create a more coherent presentation, which you can then feed the Notebook LM or whatever else to see if that turns into a conversation that works. But I'm not sure that Notebook LM fed each individual piece is going to be able to sort of create the through line that we're looking for in what you're presenting to us. Hank, please.
Yeah, thanks. I thought it was a very interesting set of ideas. I think for people like us, if it gets reorganized in some of the ways that Gil and others were suggesting, it could have a powerful punch for people like us. So what I want to do is ask you a few questions, like perhaps the people in your target county are not so much like us. What makes this story a story that the people there want to hear? They may listen, but they have to hear it and they have to make it their own somehow. So why is this story very suitable for your target audience in the county?
Well, there is a lot of concern about what's happening politically. There's a lot of sense that people's voices are not being heard. I think, like many other counties, people are very concerned about their future of their children with changes that are going on in terms of not just politically, but with AI coming on board. And they feel that government is not responsive to their needs or is not addressing that. That's why on the issue of election 2026, the question that I always put forth is, what is it that we're not talking about? And this I got from Joe Rogan, actually. He always said, and that's, as a psychiatrist, I know when people bring up all sorts of things, there's something they're avoiding talking about. So in my county, I would imagine, like many other counties, people are concerned about their kids and things of that kind. Plus, I must say, I mean, I'm connected within certain of the officials, including the healthcare system. So it's a matter of they're certainly aligned with making better care for people on a medical level. I'm connected with other people that are organized in social services. So
Will the people who are the normal citizens of the county, not the officials, will they be able to retell the story as if it's their story?
well, that's why it's an experiment, you know.
So,
If you have any
to
suggestions of how to try to do that more effective or to try to do it, that's why my thought was to do it as a publication initially, using also putting articles in local papers. I'm hoping to, with the public libraries, which I see as an anchor institution, engage with them. And I started already conversation with them. So again, it's to understand the ecosystem and recognize that there's a lot of different individual with different desires and needs. You don't have to access all of them, but that's why I'm a big fan of Daniela Meadows about changing the paradigm. And changing the paradigm is that making people think that they do have a voice in the democracy. And it's not just
Shimon, am I
casting
right?
their vote, once every 4 years or every 2 years.
Yeah. Shimon, am I right to say that you are test flying this with us, but haven't test flown it with people in your own county yet? Because I think, to Kevin's point, one of the things that would help a lot would be to figure out what is actually getting any kind of traction with your neighbors.
For sure. I think I'm test driving it or test whatever you called it with this group because there was that kind of broad ideas trying to kind of think about and get feedback to what extent, for example, with my county, I mean, I've started conversation with the healthcare providers and they're interested, how do we build AI based tools that can make healthcare outcomes better, but from my perspective, I need to think that we go beyond that. We got to talk about AI.
Yeah.
There's a lot more that we need to talk about, and that's the role of journalism.
I think iPhone 11 is John Kelly, and he'd like to jump into the conversation. I'm not sure. John?
I am going to have to leave in about 5 minutes, though. So,
Oh, that's right.
th- yeah, thanks for referencing me, Jerry. Yeah, I just joined about 5 minutes ago, and I was just listening, and I didn't have anything in particular to add at this point. But yeah, I appreciate the conversation.
Thanks, John.
Can I just
anyone else with thoughts
yeah?
here?
Can I just add one thing? If nobody else has anything, just one thing. Just adding
Go ahead,
to
Alex.
what Stacy and you said, Jerry, as well. One of the things I find invaluable, and I have done it time and time again, I put tons of factoids onto an AI, and then I say, it's called creating a persona or whatever, fancy words, but basically say, how do I present it to a health professional? How to present it to a normal customer? How to present it to this and that? And it gives me a framework with which to work with. I don't use exactly what it says, but it gives me a good idea of how to frame things, especially when there's a lot of concepts and I might muddle things up if I try to go or overload or whatever. You can use words like simplify or complex or you try, etc. Anyway, it's the technique which extends Jerry's kind of idea, I think, that use AI to do what you do, but then say, okay, I'm going to talk to a normal person in Montgomery County. How should I present this? It doesn't mean you present it exactly like that, but it gives you a good idea at what level of complexity to pitch it at. Because if you go to your neighbor and tell him what he told us, he'll be polite or she'll be polite. They'll say, yeah, interesting, but they won't know what thread to pick out of it.
yeah, I've actually been discussed it a year and a half ago here with this group. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I've actually tried for this presentation to get some thoughts on how to frame it. Apparently it didn't work out very well.
Don't take me as a measure. I'm not as academic as everybody else here.
No, I appreciate your input. I mean, again,
Um,
for me, it's I mean, my goal is to get on a few podcasts, practice it. And I'm certainly talking to people, you call them neighbors, but people in my community. So it's just a matter of really trying to understand where I need to focus. My sense is the overall ideas and project is the right way to approach things for me. That's how I work. The question is how to refine it.
One other suggestion, which I'd love to talk to you more about it, but is all the things you spoke are such large topics. And if you're asking people to help, I mean, you take a topic like, I don't know, democracy or whatever. How does anyone pitch in? So I don't know, you know, it's sort of, everything you spoke to us is quite large, and I wouldn't know where to fit in all that.
Yeah. I mean, for example, I kind of worked with Klaus around the issue of the first 1,000 days of life, just focusing on the question of nutrition. And I learned a lot from him about the Farm Bill. And then applying and learning about the Farm Bill using AI to really break it down. And then using more, not just AI, but using locally an understanding of how much of SNAP and WIC comes into our county. And with that information, I don't go to someone and say, well, we have this big project. I go and say, look, the first 1,000 days of life are important. Food is crucial. There's 50% of the population that's getting benefit from this farm bill. You, as our congressperson, what are you doing to make sure that that's still available? And then I go to the physicians or nurse practitioner, whatever, and I say, you know, you have all these people going through your practice. Do you know where they get their food? So I don't go and talk to them about democracy, and I don't talk to them about the fact that the Constitution is about, you know, how do we structure, you know, like the.
All right, I understood that. So sorry to interrupt, because I think you want to go. Just now, what was my mental picture of what you were doing? I thought you were presenting something to get help from people.
Mhm.
What you're actually trying to do, based on what you said, is people help you generate your ideas so you can go and do something. You don't need us or other people, not us, but you don't need other people to help you. You just it's from you out, and you just want advice on how to develop your ideas or corpus or whatever. Would that describe it? Because I thought it was you were trying to recruit people to help you with all this.
No, I'm not trying to recruit anyone.
Okay, so I misunderstood from the start what it was. Yeah.
Stacy, I mean, I'm going to have to really, I have a.
One sentence. I just wanted to say before
Go
you
ahead,
left
Stacey.
that my intuition says that maybe in designing the newsletter, you just in designing what would be there might show a clear picture of like the center point of a map for the greater project. So I just wanted to say that.
If you're interested, I can send you the current newsletter, but
Yeah, I think a discussion around that is what really helps, because that's also what brings out different people's interests. And again, you're looking to engage the citizenry. I think that is probably the most likely place that they'll come from initially and then connect.
that's great. Well, thanks, everyone. This has been helpful,
Thank
and
you. That
I
was really
hope it's
great.
been, I guess, interesting for you.
Thank you for offering, and thank you for putting this in front of us. And we'll come back. So
If you,
share
can you get a copy of the comments I can in the chat?
Of course.
All right.
I always repost those, so I'll send you a copy.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Cool. Okay, so I think everybody who had to leave at the top of the hour has left, which means we can do a hard reset on this call, or we can go back to this topic, but we're welcome to also go back to the starting question and start over.
Sorry, what was the starting question for those of us that have
The
limited?
starting question is the starting question was, what are good things to do in this moment? What would work? What actually is functional? And it could be stories we have read that we know are functional because the descriptions sort of said so. It could also be wish list items of our own of why the hell haven't we tried X? And Hank, I don't know if you were inspired to bring any such stories to us, because I think last week you were resonating with the quest, and I figured that you might actually have some things in mind.
Not so much the stories, but maybe some categories of things and questions about what kind of stories do we like to tell ourselves about the way the world works? Uh, who are the people we want to influence? And they could be administrators, like in Shimon's example. They could be the citizenry. They could be young people. They could be politicians. They could be people who wear MAGA hats, whatever. But what are the stories that they tell themselves? What resonates with them? Uh, in my filter bubble, it's all about greed and hating the elite and making yourself as rich as possible. But I'm not sure that those are actually the stories that people in those situations tell themselves. So the first thing I would like to do is find out, and not necessarily that we do it here, but in general, what would work. But I think finding out what's in the heads of the people who we see as going in a different way than we'd like the country to go, and that goes down from Donald Trump and Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk down to the person who delivers the pizza or the mother who's driving her kids to school. So that's really important. I think stories are essential. And if we want to reach a lot of the people who are not influencers but are being subjected to influence, what kind of media is important to them? Comic books and anime and video and podcasts and art exhibitions and art, street art and music and concerts and yeah, what works with those type of people? How do you get a new idea or a new nuance into their heads? And something that I don't think has been mentioned in this call yet, but I think is extremely important, is hope and no hope and redefining hope and reinventing hope and creating urban infrastructures for hope. And that's quite abstract, but what does that mean on the ground? What does that mean in Shimon's County? What does it mean in the counties of the people on this call now? What does it mean to the people living in the area I do, just outside of Amsterdam? I think those things are really important to consider. And of course, the words come up in conversation, and it's very much in my mind. What are the paradigms which are guiding the times at the moment, not only in the United States, but virtually all over the world? And are those paradigms emerging? Are they old paradigms? Are they shifting paradigms? And how do you change a paradigm or a system built on paradigms? And that's why I liked the reference to Donella Meadows, whose work on that is still essential. let me leave that for now.
Thanks, Hank. Anybody else, like, where's your head on this topic right now?
On Hank's topic.
Go ahead, Klaus.
Yeah, sorry.
No, on what Hank said, but the whole mix of this conversation. Go ahead, Klaus.
Yeah, I think my observation here is I'm working on a community project here in Bend, and there is just a lot of anxiety now coming through with all this noise that comes out of the media, and then you have this disturbing aggression, from this right-wing group there who are sparking everywhere into every conversation and into having to wave the flags and drive their trucks around town with 2 flags hanging out, and so there is a lot of nervousness there, and it's you have to actually be quite gentle, in talking about it. People are really nailed down in this. I mean, my neighbor is a retired lieutenant colonel, one of my neighbors. He was stationed at NATO, so he had great international experience, and should really lived in Europe for quite a while. But boy, he is just he's just convinced that Trump has a 4-year mission, and this is going to go all great, and he has a great plan. So trying to explain to him that there's no visible plan here, it just doesn't work. Right? So you have to be cautious what kind of conversations you engage, so you don't alienate anybody, and you can maintain a conversation. But it's a rough time. I mean, this is a very profound moment for the United States, and we can't underestimate that. And so, I mean, my wife, for example, can't even watch the news. She's totally stressed out about where this is leading us, because she knows enough, to realize that there is some geopolitical danger here that most people don't get. I mean, they don't understand the risks that we could actually get into a real war here, and that at the very least, even just a trade war will have significant impacts on our way of life. So what Shimon is doing, I really like the project in a way that it takes people's attention away from all this negativity and puts it into something that is positive, because the Constitution is positive, right? The U.S. Constitution is a beautiful body of work that tells us that we matter, that even as a little guy, as a citizen, you matter, your voice matters. And what the current administration has done is basically disempower, the average citizen in a way where you guys just don't know, we need to manage this top down because otherwise it won't work. And that's really discouraging. So to bring this out, I just think he needs to connect it more. This 1,000 day of life is a freestanding topic that doesn't connect to the citizen engagement. And so he hasn't found that bridge yet, to say there's so much happening that we need to correct as citizens in the way that our government is running, because it impacts the way we raise our children in so many ways. So somehow, but that's, yeah, so there's no easy answer. I mean, I'm tap dancing around here because, I work and people are afraid, right? I mean, the school district here and the Meals on Wheels, who at first, when I explained to them how they are exposed to significant budget cuts, they were, no, okay, we are with you. And then all of a sudden we don't think we can do this, right? Because this administration is brutal. I mean, if someone doesn't quite dance along, boom, they just pull the funding. So the there's fear already in the system, and that's just, that's so un-American. It's just incredible, but that's what it is. So you have to be extremely cautious, as in the way you want to engage.
Thanks, Klaus. I'm not so sure if fear is un-American, but that's maybe a separate conversation. But I like your emphasis on the stress that people are under. And maybe if we scope down this conversation some to something like that, we end up in a place where we can share what's been tried, what's working, et cetera, et cetera. I fear that trying to solve for the whole, and I was hearing this somewhat in Shimon's presentation. He's trying to solve something, he's trying to solve multiple problems that he sees in the world in one presentation. And it feels like maybe he needs a frame that would let him just hold multiple different ideas comfortably together to say, hey, here's one initiative, and how might we do that? And then here's an unrelated initiative that would lead to generally the same kind of goal over here.
Yeah.
And then to test them out. And I feel like the sooner he can get on the ground where he is in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, and like try things out and see what works, the sooner he'll have like direct feedback from people who are more relevant to what he's doing than we are. But it feels like a lot of us are sort of chewing on really, really large nuggets, very large pieces of the puzzle, and it's very hard to present that cohesively. Yeah. Anyone else with
The
thoughts
project,
on?
the project
Go ahead.
2026, that is a good umbrella, if he just stitches it together in a different way.
Except 2026 is next year, and I totally get celebrating the 250th anniversary of the US and all that, but the 1,000-year health project, the 1,000-day health project for our youth is not a thing that's going to be achieved by 2026. It's that was bumping against a frame for me just as I was listening to it. I'm like, oh, this sounds like a long-term project for how do we make sure we have healthy children, which is a fine thing, but I didn't understand it fitting under the year 2026, for example.
Right.
So yeah, interested in helping that way, that sort of materialize. Hank, please.
Yeah, let me try to approach what I said in my monologue a few moments ago in a different way. What you see here in Western Europe, and also the way Western Europe looks at America through the media, is that being rich and privileged is emerging as a societal narrative now. And if that's so, what does rich mean to people? Is it only money, or is it being rich in something else? What is privileged? If that's so, we don't want to make people who want to be rich and privileged the bad guys, because that's feeding negativity. And we don't want to feed people's negativity. We want to feed people's positivity. So I liked Shimon's choice of using the Constitution and the basic ideas of founding fathers, at least for the United States. But I agree with what you said a few minutes ago, Jerry. That's still next year, and that's a great campaign for people coming up to the election next year. But as for now, I'd like to know, is what I said a moment ago, being rich and privileged, emerging as a new societal narrative? Is that so? And what other new societal narratives are emerging, not necessarily amongst online influencers, but amongst celebrities and people that others look up to? And that might even be people looking up to your neighbor, Klaus, as you described him. Who do people look up to, and why do they look up to them? What's going a little bit deeper beyond the surface? What's the systemic connections below the surface?
Can I just contribute something on this?
Please do.
I'm a multicultural person. Yes, I'm a stereotype of a certain white male, but basically, the thing is, I have moved through 3 or 4 countries in my life. I never got, I'll use the word indoctrinated into a single culture. So even when you guys talk, when I watch the news or whatever, everything has an angle. Everything has and I think, but I don't think you're right because you haven't experienced that culture. You don't see that point of view. Okay. And I think one person's rich person is another person's, I don't know, something else. Where we've ended up is the result of the ability of, is it the media? Is it the social media? Is it the politicians, the people that govern us, to pigeonhole us into a single state so that they can tell us what they want us to hear to support them or whatever. And it's a bit complex, but I still go back to, if I cannot talk to my neighbor about a topic, how is this ever going to be solved? I mean, the Trump issue, I don't like Trump. I don't think he's doing good things necessarily, but I don't see him as the only problem. The problem is the reaction to whatever was there before Trump, because they didn't handle things properly either. And nobody seems to be talking about that. Nobody seems to be saying, right, what is the base level? How am I going to talk to my neighbor without him whacking me across the head? Or what happens is I lose a client, I lose a family member, I lose a friend, which is what's basically happening at the moment. So even asking the question, what does rich mean? Culturally, it means a lot of things to a lot of people. So why am I apologizing? No, I'm not sorry. That's my view.
I don't know. I was just about to ask you that. I was just about to ask you that, Alex. I love what you're saying, and Hank, to your point, I was puzzled about a couple things. Like, it seems like in the US, what's happening right now is the privileging of a bunch of billionaires and the privileging of their point of view of what the future might look like, which is like, we're going to go live on Mars. America's going to be the greatest country, whatever. And that seems like an artificial frame for a few people in the country on the planet, right? And it seems to disregard what ordinary people are very likely feeling, which is, I think, not exactly about who's rich and privileged, although they're sort of watching a shit show play out, of those kinds of people, but rather like ordinary pragmatic things, including a whole mess of fears that have come up several times on this call, but including, I think, a wish in general that their children's lives be better than theirs. And for me, the thing that predates Trump, that Trump seized on and has milked and blown hot air on and done a very good job of turning into a raging bonfire, is this discontent with existing systems, with, hey, my children's future doesn't look better than my life. And that's terrible. You don't want to hand the next generation down something just really awful. Right. And Hank, I know that a large portion of your life has been spent asking people what they think their future might look like, and to tell that in pictures and poetry and other kinds of ways of trying to express that feeling. And right now it seems like that set of futures is not on the table for conversation. I'm making that up as I'm saying it, but it feels kind of right. It's like we're not having a healthy conversation about the future. We're busy tussling about this red blue thing and like, oh, isn't Trump awful and blah 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 blah. And all of that distracts us and keeps us away from the good work we could be doing together to make our futures better, which is where I was trying very poorly and awkwardly to steer our conversation a bit. Like what are the kinds of things we could do to get back in conversation with our neighbors, to deal with the stress that's sort of mounting, and really like, I don't see how Trump's current economic program is a big win. It's a big success. I see that it causes a whole mess of things that are going to hurt a whole lot of people. But I'm no economist, and I'm not, a geopolitical analyst that gets lots and lots of attention and follows. But if that's true, then we need to come together as humans and figure some shit out that works. And we need to have better tools at hand or processes at hand or ideas at hand that help us get there, that help us do better things together. Or we're hosed. Like, or things are really going to get bad in a way that we can barely predict. Because there's a lot of parallels between this moment and a lot other moments in history. But one of the lessons I've learned about the lessons of history is that we usually reach back to the wrong analogy. We usually reach back to a recent analogy. So right now, oh my God, this looks just like Hitler coming to power and fascism is on the rise and so forth. And that's not an implausible narrative, but I'm unclear that that's the right thing that's actually happening. I don't know that that's what's happening here. And and I think focusing too much on that is also really distracting in the ways I was just saying. And sorry to go on for so long about this, but I'm trying to help wayfind us into what to share with each other that is positive in the next 9 minutes of our call.
I feel that what we should share is a way of getting our politicians to answer, to address the right issues. Okay. You're not going to believe the topic here in the UK the last couple of days with friends or family or whatever, is that the Supreme Court decided that there are two genders, biological genders. And that has huge implications on the legislature. And everybody's saying, why did you spend so long trying to decide that? Okay, because everybody sees it, or not everybody, a lot of people see it as, well, it's obvious. You've got the biological side, you've got the legal side, make it work. But it was important because the politicians of the time, they're not with Trump camp, the other one, wanted to promote the other side. And, but sorry, anyway, digressing. So in answer to your question is, I think we should be trying to find ways to get the politicians to address the important issues for the people. And if we agree
So
on it,
let me offer,
yeah, go for it.
yeah. Let me offer that the politicians are so bought into their current positions that they are incapable of stepping out of line. I am shocked that the American Republican Party, which formerly was made up of birchers and rabid anti-communists, have become a cheering section for Vladimir Putin at this point. That amazes me. But what I'm using that as evidence of is it may be that we need to ignore the politicians wholesale right now, because your question is, how do we get the politicians to see and answer in some different way? I'm like, maybe we need to leave them alone to have their little fights and do something different. Because I'm seeing a bunch
Can
of
we
people
get that power?
captive.
Sorry.
I'm seeing a bunch of people captive to a power play that they cannot escape. They're not able to have reasonable, to my mind, points of view about stuff. It's very weird. Stacy.
Yeah, for what you say, this is why I think we really need to address communication and why, for me, that's the focus. In my town, I have MAGA Mike, and we have been hounding him on social media, in protests outside, to have a town hall in person. So now he promises it's coming. So now it gets announced, but all the seats have already been taken. And I subscribe to
Wow.
the newsletter. It was never mentioned in the newsletter. The answer we're getting now is, well,
Yeah.
when they mentioned it on Facebook, all the tickets went, really quick. Secondly, in addition to that, our local newspaper prints an article, an op piece, but it looks like a news article because it talks about things that he's done. And they don't disclose that the writer of the article works for him. And so we use Facebook. I found out about it because a friend that runs a public organization posted it. So now I was able to take it and share it. Other people were able to talk about it. So that was one thing I wanted to address. The other thing is I want to go back to what you said before and say that one thing that I do see people on both sides concerned about that could sway people is Trump and the administration not adhering to what the Supreme Court has told them to do.
Maybe. I hope
So
so.
again, I'm not saying everybody, but I'm saying a focus on the Constitution is a good place to test the waters. So like, or, with the
Yep.
immigration, how they're scapegoating certain people, actually lying, allegations. It doesn't matter who the person is. What matters is that everybody gets due process. And if due process gets taken away from one, it could get taken away from anyone. And I think unless you're really tribal and you're not thinking at all, and I don't think that's the majority of people in our country. I really don't. You care about that.
Hmm.
Over.
Yeah, thanks, Stacy. From your lips to God's ears, as we say. Hank.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with what you said, Jerry. I think at the moment we should ignore the politicians and look at other groups of people that are interesting. Certainly, if Shimon can optimize his story and get people to tell it, not only in Montgomery County or not only Pennsylvania, but tell his story about the reclaiming the Constitution, that's very good moving up to the midterm elections. But I'm more interested in Klaus's neighbor and people like that who may be looked up to in the community. And I'm also would be interested in what are teenagers concerned about right now, and what are the stories that they think are really great right now. So this is a movement that has to flow on many different fronts. So I think the story of retaking, revitalizing the Constitution, as Shimon is trying to say it, and the story that Klaus's neighbor and hundreds and thousands of people like him, who people look up to in the community, how can you have that conversation with them, and especially the teenagers? Some of them will be voting next year, and a lot of them will probably be voting in 3 years' time. And what's going on in their minds?
Thanks, Hank. I just subscribed to the son of somebody that I normally follow on Substack. I'm racking this brain right now to remember who the heck it was, because the son was like, I've got some stuff to say about all the stuff that's happening in the world and maybe a different perspective here. And I wanted to hear that too. And his first couple posts were quite interesting, but I'm now forgetting who the heck that was. John, please.
Okay, so it's too soon to say that this is a positive, successful thing. It's just an interesting beginning. I'm facilitating the democracy subgroup of impact circles at the portal in Marin. We have John Hagel, a very distinguished, longtime author, whatever, and he's giving us his work about impact circles and basically how to produce change. They also have a couple of really interesting things that model us, just like we often end with a poem. They actually had the living poet that wrote one of the poems that that was given to us here in the morning. That was great. They have a very talented singer who leads the group in singing. You can do this in Marin, and
Yeah.
they also have a lot of other groups going. They have noble masculinity and blah blah blah, and that pulled a lot of people away from the democracy group. So our group is very small, but the interesting thing is we have this structure. They did something we've done here. They call it zoom in, zoom out. Where you'd set a 10-year goal and a 6-month goal, but you don't set them. You brainstorm them. You write them out and spread them out and look at them and make some decisions about that, keeping those two time frames in mind at the same time as a orienting and energizing technique. The other thing is just, we had a beginning and an end. It's going to go for 6 weeks, and then we're going to have, 2 hours in the evening every week or every 2 weeks for 6 weeks, and then we have a half day where we live integrate what all is happening. I'm not talking about that specific structure, but just the idea that commit, beginning and end, some kind of guidance about what constitutes a goal. Yeah, we did some of that flopping around about democracy's too broad and whatever, and but if you have to come up with a 6 month and a 10-year goal, you start to get very specific about civic juries. You get very specific pretty quickly, and people start to align around that. So it's too soon to call this any kind of a success. It's just beginning, but I will report back as it goes. And I was heartened to see that it seems to be off to a good start, and that they're doing a couple of things that we do, but amplifying them, doing more in the way of emotional tuning of the group at the beginning and the end, using both songs and poems. So.
Thanks, John. And I'd love to hear your reporting on it. And you're making me think of what structures might we use that would be appropriate to Zoom, that would help us do that. All suggestions welcome. Send them to me individually or put them on the list or whatever, please.
Okay.
Klaus.
Yeah, we're over time already, but really short. I find that food is a phenomenally easy way to talk about things that are wrong. It's always my lieutenant, colonel neighbor, former attaché, when we're talking about how we're polluting, the food supply and destroying the soil and the impacts of all this. Hey, listen up, that really resonates. So, and it's not political, and it redirects the attention to these companies that are doing that, and so on. So there are ways to point towards things that are just really wrong in our economy, that we can all agree are just bad. It's just not, they need to be fixed. Yeah, we're over time. Great
Yeah,
conversation.
that's all right, Klaus. Thank you. I find that food and music are really nice common subjects in that way, that they help people bridge and do stuff together.
Yeah.
And we are Ken Homerless today, which means we don't have a person who can find the appropriate poem, at least not expressly. He's going to be missing the next couple weeks. He's in Spain, so we'll have to do without. Maybe one of us can find a poem and bring it in the next couple calls. But thank you for
AI do a porn.
What?
Have AI generated porn.
that's what we could do. Exactly. Good.
Yeah.
And I
So
just wanted
thank you.
to say what I put in the chat to Hank and what he mentioned about the song and the poem. I think the brainstorming is an element of importance related to emotions as well.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for bringing that into the conversation. I hadn't caught up with the chat yet. Thanks, Stacy. Thank you all for hanging in there with this sort of river rapids raft conversation today. But let's keep at it. And thank you very much. Bye for now.
Bye.